It's time to do some power rankings. Free agency is effectively over. All the stars, besides Aaron Rodgers, have signed with teams, so we're going to pick out the top 10 teams in the NFL prior to the draft, rank them, and we have different lists today, some differences of opinion. The top, relatively the same, gets a little bit frisky down near the bottom though. I'll start things off. My 10th best team in the NFL is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and this is a team which can just physically maul you, and that's not just because they're strong lines, though they certainly do help. Bucky Irving is a short, bruising power back. Mike Evans, big bodied receiver. They got pretty good tight end play. Baker Mayfield, deceptively scrappy. He will run you over, put his shoulder into your chest as a quarterback. They beat up on other teams. And I think they can do that to most lower tiers in the NFL, most mid tiers in the NFL. You do not want to see Tampa in the playoff games. And thanks to having that weak NFC South division, they will always have home field advantage in the first round. So I like Tampa. I think they're kind of limited in some areas ceiling-wise. They're never going to have a true generational passing attack with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. Chris Godwin's going to be a little bit banged up at the start of the year. We hope he gets back and is fully healthy. There are things holding this team back, but being strong in the trenches, having a powerful running game, and an elite number one option who's been consistent for the better part of the last decade, that gets you on this list for me. Baker Mayfield's a top 10 quarterback, by the way.
I agree with basically everything that you said. The only reason I don't have them making it in the back end of my top 10 is because I do believe, like you, they have a little bit lower of a ceiling, and they will wind up with a very good record because they play in the NFC South. The Saints, I think, are going to be bad again. Who knows with the Falcons? Michael Penix entering his first full year as a starter in the NFL. What are they going to be able to accomplish? So they play in a little bit more of a mess of a division. I think their ceiling's a little bit lower than some of these other teams that I'm going to be doing some projection for. And that's why I would have them at 11 or 12 looking in compared to some of these teams I do have at the back end of the top 10. Coming in at number 10 for me is the Minnesota Vikings. And when you look at early power rankings after free agency, a lot of people are doubting them. Large media outlets are having them finish bottom of the NFC North, and I just don't see that. I think they have had one of the best off seasons for any team when it comes to filling holes that they had last season. The biggest problems they had were their interior offensive line. They went and addressed that in a big way. Their interior defensive line, they went and addressed that in a big way. And the only question mark you can really have about this Vikings team that won 14 games last year is the quarterback position and J.J. McCarthy. Other than that, their roster is very good, and they have an excellent coaching staff. They still have Kevin O'Connell. They still have Brian Flores. So they have the coaches to get it done. They have the roster to get it done. It is simply just the quarterback. And the reason I have them at 10 and not higher on the list is because I'm not willing to put them that high with a first-year quarterback coming off a knee injury in the preseason, hasn't yet played in the NFL, is extremely young, and I think they're going to be ups and downs for him throughout the season. But the roster is just so talented that I do think it'll be able to carry them to a lot of wins, and they'll be one of the better teams in the NFL next year.
There were ups and downs last year with Sam Darnold at quarterback. He was playing some truly bad football points, and I'm not just talking about the Rams and Lions games against the Cardinals, the Titans, the Jaguars. He was just awful. The Vikings still won those games. They've got one of the three most talented rosters in the NFL. I'll talk about them a little bit later. My number 9 team is the Los Angeles Chargers, and they've addressed their offensive line a little bit. They got Mekhi Becton, really big, powerful bruising, presumably right, could play left guard, is going to shore up that interior a little bit. Probably going to use a draft pick on that as well. Defense, re-sign Khalil Mack, let Bosa walk. The correct move. Mack is better than Bosa at this point in their careers. Still have Justin Herbert, sign Najee Harris. Running game is going to be just downhill, 100 miles an hour. Break one tackle, get 8 yards of play, and just power through teams not capable of hanging with you in the front seven. Still lacking a true number one receiver, which is going to hold them back. Ladd's more of a slot guy. There's only so much you can do on the outside. He's an X. Maybe Quinn Johnson takes that next step. Maybe they draft Colston Loveland. Who knows? But it's a well put together team top to bottom. You know they're going to be scrappy on defense. You know they've got really high level quarterback play, and you know they're going to be an efficient running team. I think teams they lose to, they will lose badly to. It'll look like the playoffs where Herbert just can't quite get anything going and the running game gets bottled up a little bit. But the teams I got below them, I could definitely see him beating the Buccaneers. I could see him beating half the NFC North, which I don't have listed. I could see him beating the Steelers pretty easily. It's going to be LA style football. It's a Jim Harbaugh coach team.
I actually have the Chargers a little bit higher on my list, and I think the biggest thing we look at when we look at Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh's history is he's one of the best roster-building head coaches, I think, in NFL history. or in football history with what he was able to do at Michigan in college, with what he did with the 49ers on his first tenure, what he did last year winning the number of games that he did with a worse roster than the Chargers had in the previous 3 seasons or so. So I am trusting his ability to draft players that are going to produce at a high level for this Chargers team. That is why I have them a little bit higher, and I will, of course, elaborate on that in a few teams from now.
I greatly disagree on the idea that last year's Chargers team had a worse roster than it did a few years ago. They didn't have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Big whoop. They upgraded a running back and they upgraded a tackle and ran the ball more. I wouldn't say it's a worse roster necessarily.
Well, I'd say
it's a different roster.
Prime Austin Eckler, I think, is a better back than J.K. Dobbins, also because he's just so much more available.
J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are a much more efficient running duo than Prime Austin Eckler. He was a much better receiving back, but he would have no place in the Chargers offense.
So just hating on all those rushing touchdowns he'd get.
Pretty much, yeah.
Coming in at number 9 for me, and this is where a lot of projection is happening. I realize that. I have the Chicago Bears, and what were the Bears' biggest weaknesses last year? It was their interior offensive line and their coaching staff. What have they done to address that? They got the hottest commodity head coach I think we've had in the last half decade, one of the best offensive minds in the NFL with the Detroit Lions over the previous few seasons, and they went out, got a star in Joe Thuney for what a star could be at left guard. They added a center, they added another right guard, and they improved across the board there. So they're going to have a consistent coaching staff. They have a consistent interior offensive line. They showed some flashes here and there amidst all of the turmoil and dysfunction that was the 2024 Bears team. And I think with what Ben Johnson has shown he's able to do from a play calling perspective, from a coaching perspective, we're going to see Caleb Williams take the next step defensively already through free agency. They've added some pieces to that defensive line, so I think that is going to help there. And I think the Bears are going to be able to make a playoff push next season, and the high end is them being a top 10 team in the NFL.
I don't think that at all. I mean, one, their defense got worse.
Well, I know you don't think that.
2, their weaknesses last year were not just, their O-line's bad and their coaching's bad. They had an issue at quarterback. Again, projectile want to say, the O-line hindered him back. Caleb Williams held the ball forever. He did not have good pocket awareness, and he was too conservative at points. The low interception number deceives how lackadaisical he was, how hesitant he was to throw the ball into tight windows. That's not what you want from a star franchise quarterback. Will Ben Johnson help that? Probably. Will their defense get worse? Probably. Will that offensive line take about a month or so to gel together? I kind of think so, just because you're sticking 3 new pieces in there who have never really played with each other before. That could be an issue. That will work itself out by the midseason point, but I think that's going to hinder him a little bit early. Continuity is the most important thing on the offensive line once you get past the ability.
I don't think the defense is going to get worse because last year, it was only good for the first 4, 5 games.
Yeah, and that was when they actually won games last season.
But the defense was atrocious a majority of last year, so it is not that hard for the defense.
It ain't getting better. I'll tell you that.
You're
going to see the back half of the season. You're going to see the back half of the season defense a lot more than you're going to see the front half, unless they do a lot of work in the draft, which seems very un-Ben Johnson-like. But yeah, I hard disagree with that.
I think Caleb Williams, he was very rough at points last year, but I think the culture of that organization with the coaching staff that was in place was not conducive for him to be as productive he could be as a rookie. And then the interior offensive line is another piece of that puzzle. So does Caleb Williams deserve some of the blame for what happened during his rookie year? Yes, of course. But the coaching staff and what he had on that offensive line did not make it exactly easy for him to be as successful as possible.
Yeah, it's almost like the number 1 overall pick should be able to rise above some of that stuff. Anyway, as for the culture, have to wait and see how Johnson's culture is. If things go south in Chicago, they will go south quick. At number 8, I've got the Washington Commanders. And this is a team which caught fire towards the end of last year and is deservedly getting praise from people, but it's now getting a little bit overrated. I think Terry McLaurin's a great wide receiver. I think Debo can be a great piece on a winning offense who can do a bunch of different things. I think their O-line, still not that great. Right tackle situation, less than optimal. A few holes on the interior which could be patched up. Laramie Tunsil, I'm in 2 minds on Laramie Tunsil. I think it was the right move for the Texans to move off, and particularly for multiple day 2 and day 3 picks. I think he's somewhat questionable in the run game. I think the penalties were a big issue, particularly the false starts in 2024. I I think he's a much better pass protector than what Washington had last season. Defensively, I can only assume Dan Quinn is going to keep building up that unit, getting his guys to work in his system to achieve at the highest level possible in their ability. But they're also getting older. This defense was old in 2024. It's going to be older in 2025. Presumably, they will utilize their draft to build that side of the ball up a little bit more. But I'm skeptical if they're going to truly be able to crush those picks. Washington runs hot and cold to me. If they're playing great, if they're clicking, I'd put them above pretty much every team in the NFL. If they're not playing great, if they're not clicking, they can be in a one-score game with anybody in the NFL. It's dependent on how good Jayden Daniels is year 2. If he is still that top 5 guy, if he takes a step into the top 4, top 3, then I'd probably move him up. But until I see it, and because I'm such a big proponent of the sophomore slump, I'm going to keep them right down here at 8.
Yeah, so I have them a little bit higher on my list, and it's more because I believe in the coaching staff taking the next step in year 2. We saw them have a strong year 1 with Dan Quinn, with Cliff Kingsbury, so I think they're only going to build more continuity in year 2. We saw what Dan Quinn did as the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, building it up year after year. So I think the defense will take the next step. On the offensive side of the ball, I think they're only more talented than they were last year. And the only thing you maybe have to be worried about a little bit is the sophomore quarterback slump. We've seen it happen to a few quarterbacks where they take a slight step back. Now, we also haven't even seen a year as good as what Jayden Daniels did as a rookie. So will he take a step back? Who knows? I'll talk about that more in a little bit.
I also think it's worth noting they lost Dante Fowler and Jonathan Allen. That's going to make the D-line worse.
Oh, well, that was something I was going to mention. The biggest thing I did not like about the Commanders is that they lost Jonathan Allen and then gave a big contract to Javon Kinlaw.
Who was terrible last season. Like,
he was more available and healthy, but Jonathan Allen's a better player.
If you go watch Javon Kinlaw's highlights, and I don't advocate highlight scouting all that often, but this is actually relevant. He had 4.5 sacks last season. I don't think he generated a single one himself. Someone either got to the quarterback first and ushered him into Fowler, held onto him so Fowler could get to him, or the quarterback was running out of the pocket and just ran into Fowler. He's not an explosive pass rusher, limited at points in the running game. The speed is only going to get worse as time goes on. That's not a good sign. They got worse in the defensive line. Teams are going to run over them in the NFC.
My optimism for them is on defense stems from Dan Quinn and his ability to put the guys in the best position possible to win. So that's my perspective there. Coming in at number 8, I think the Lions are the 8th best team in the NFL, and the rabid Lions fan base that potentially is watching this video is angrily typing at their keyboard or on their phone when they hear me say that.
As they should. It's not a serious take. We're clowning.
It is a serious take. And from a roster perspective, are they one of the best teams in the NFL? Yes, of course. But they lost both coordinators, 2 coordinators that were some of the best coordinators in the NFL during their time with the Lions. Ben Johnson was a genius on the offensive side of the ball. Aaron Glenn had that defense humming. That is the biggest reason I have them falling all the way to 8. I don't think they did enough in the offseason to convince me that they're still going to for sure be one of the best teams in the NFL in the top 5. They hired the passing game coordinator from the Denver Broncos. They promoted from within for the defensive coordinator. And I think especially early in the season, maybe I think they get it figured out as the season goes on. There is going to be some significant road bumps when it comes to figuring out the offensive and defensive side of the ball where they lose some games that you don't expect them to heading into the matchup.
I think Glenn is less replaceable than Johnson in some ways because it cannot be overwhelmingly difficult once Jared Goff has been elevated, and which, thanks to Ben Johnson, he has been, to get him playing at that level and to run a really high-powered offense with what they've got talent-wise. Got slightly worse in the offensive line. If this team is healthy, and my projection for them I'll go into later, if this team is healthy, it more than makes up for the coaching fall-off. Team was devastated by injuries in the back half of 2024. Didn't do particularly well injury-wise in the front half either, but this team was a complete wreck and beat everybody on their schedule besides the Buffalo Bills. It was a pretty clear testament to how talented this team is. Say what you want about Glenn Johnson, the coaching staff. This is a great roster, and even if they do take a slight downgrade in terms of talent from the OC and DC position, if they can field a team, if they can get their guys on the field for 15, 16 games, they will run over anybody in front of them. They are the most talented roster in the NFL outside of maybe the Eagles, and even then, I think I might still favor Detroit. The Goff question is more of an issue in the playoffs. This is not really a playoff power ranking, but I think having them at 8's silly.
The talent is not in question. It is, for me, I will
Well,
eat
yes,
my
it is. You're
words.
questioning the talent of the coaching staff.
Yeah, the talent the quality of the coaching staff, the talent on the roster for me is not in question.
Why should I think then the organization which got Johnson and Glenn could not either develop or sign quality players? Why not have faith in their ability to do that if we have faith in their ability to draft players to field teams?
The Eagles won a Super Bowl, or did not win a Super Bowl, were in the Super Bowl. The very next season, hired the wrong coordinators. The wheels came off the wagon, and they fell completely apart and lost in the first round of the playoffs.
How much of that has to do with Sirianni, though? Do we think Dan Campbell is a Nick Sirianni-esque hirer?
So you've been hyping up Sirianni.
I think he's a good guy. I think he's a good coach.
Played a role in hiring Kellen Moore.
I do think he played a role in hiring Kellen Moore. I think he did help some of that. I think you're out of your mind if you think the front office didn't consult with him at all, but he had a little bit too much responsibility last time around. It goes back.
So Nick Sirianni hate to prop up Dan Campbell.
You're a silly person if you're putting the Lions at 8. And it's not Nick Sirianni hate, it's Nick Sirianni objectivity, something you, a Giants fan, struggle with. Anyway, at number 7, I've got the Minnesota Vikings, and this can be a homer take as much as you may want it to be. I'm fully fine with acknowledging that. This is one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. The quarterback is the question, as my co-host hinted at earlier. So it's a little bit hard to make an assessment. I think JJ is going to be good. I think he's at the very minimum going to be replacement level. So I went and looked at the teams I've got above and below them. And if the teams had 2 better position groups than the Vikings outside of that quarterback, I said, okay, I'll put them above them. Because we don't know what we're going to get from JJ. We could get a really high level of play, a really efficient 70% completion percentage, low turnover rate. We could get a mess the first half of the season. It's hard to say, but being in Minnesota, the training wheels are on. So I looked at teams like Washington. Do I think they have 2 positions better than the Vikings? No. The Vikings' O-line's better, their receivers are better, their running backs are better, their D-line's better, their linebackers are better, their safeties are better. Maybe you could argue their cornerbacks are better, although I've got a lot more faith in Sanders still than I do Lattimore at this point in their careers. Chargers, same thing. Vikings, better offensive line, better running backs, better receivers. I go on and on. Same with Tampa, same with a bunch of other things. Maybe the Buccaneers, you could argue, have a better defensive line, and the cornerback room still a little bit shaky. This roster is so talented and so well coached, I think they make up for any deficiencies they have at that quarterback position. That's assuming JJ is average. If JJ is above average, this team jumps up another few spots from me. This team jumps into the top 5 if JJ has a really good, efficient rookie year. Vikings are a great roster, a great team, and they're at pretty much the start of a Super Bowl window.
I think it is silly to put them as the 7th best team in the NFL and to do that much projection with JJ as
You have the Bears at 9. The Bears are a worse team, worse roster. Caleb Williams stunk as a rookie, and you've got them at 9.
Caleb Williams at least played as a rookie, has experiences to learn and grow from, has a brand new offensive coordinator, new offensive line, and pieces where the Bears can actually move forward. We're talking about a quarterback who is the youngest starting quarterback in the NFL, is coming off of a knee injury, has never started games in the NFL before, and you're saying if he's at least... You just said he's at least a replacement level quarterback. How many replacement level quarterbacks make major waves in the NFL with a good roster?
One did last year with Sam Darnold. What are we doing here?
Sam Darnold was above a replacement level quarterback. He threw for over 4,000 yards.
Yeah, because he was throwing to Justin Jefferson, T.J. Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, and Aaron Jones running the ball for him, and had 2 great tackles for half the year. What are we doing?
That was above replacement level quarterback play.
Yeah, because it was in the Viking system. That's replacement level play in Minnesota. Maybe
replacement level play is 4,500 yards.
Above average. I would go slightly above average given the system. But looking at that team from last year, it's now a lot better. They upgraded the interior offensive line, one of the areas of weakness. They brought in 2 guys who were on the same team last year, which helps a little bit with that transition.
You're saying everything I know and agree with as to why I think they're a top 10 team, so you don't need to reiterate that.
No, I'm reiterating because you apparently need to hear. Their defensive line is better. Their secondary got better. And yet you're going to say, oh, well, we don't know about JJ. I feel pretty good about JJ McCarthy. I think they could just not pass the ball at all and conceivably still win 10 games.
I think
they could roll Jameis Winston. I think they could have rolled Daniel Jones in there. Could have kept him and let him start the first month of the season, they would have gone 3-1, 4-0, depending on who they play.
I don't think
This is a great roster.
I don't think Aaron Jones could put that many carries on his body.
Jordan Madison is there to bolster the backfield up. Again, you are just
Jordan Mason, you mean?
Potato.
Keep in mind, Vikings and Michigan fan on that side of the room.
Yeah, again, it's clear bias, but at the end of the day, I think the Vikings would absolutely smoke the Commanders if they played them head to head. I think Jaden Daniels would be on the ground a whole lot more than he wasn't. Having all that speed is nice, but Minnesota has scrappy 6-foot linebackers who can keep up with you.
I disagree. And I have the Commanders higher. So
By the way, does Minnesota play the New York Giants this year, or no? Do they not get the last place schedule?
I don't know. If they play the Giants, they win. What does that have to do with
I'm just wondering. I think there's still some resentment there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, who won in the playoffs?
I'm sorry, when was that?
Yeah.
I think it's actually a net
Last
negative.
time they played in the playoffs?
The Giants won that playoff game because that's what got Daniel Jones' $40 million.
When's the last time the Vikings won a playoff game?
I don't know. When's the last time the Giants have had a functional quarterback?
A long
Don't
time.
say Eli Manning.
They won a
It's been a
playoff game
while.
more recently.
Don't say Eli Manning. Never getting in the hall, by the way.
You done?
Are you?
I'm asking you.
I'm asking you. Are you done?
I asked you first.
I'm asking you. Are you?
Coming in at 7, I have the Los Angeles Chargers. And the reason I'm higher on them a little bit more than Isaiah is because I believe in Jim Harbaugh. I believe in his ability to build the Chargers roster through the draft and also coach this roster at a high level next season. I think they exceeded expectations, or at least my expectations last year. And now with Najee Harris, although I haven't exactly been a major fan of his, he at least gives you a lot more consistency at running back. You know he's going to be there every single week. A very solid power back, I think, for this Chargers offense. And then you give him someone like Mekhi Becton to run behind. So if J.K. Dobbins is healthy, he's a little bit more of an explosive guy. Maybe they add someone in the draft, Kamani Vidal, who didn't exactly get a lot of playing time last season. Maybe gets more playing time this year. So I like their backfield. Mekhi Becton makes their offensive line even better than it was last year. They added Mike Williams back to the receiver room, who I know it's a diminished version of what he used to be, but that's a nice piece to have there. Maybe they add another offensive threat in the draft. So with what the Chargers have done in the offseason, what I think they're going to do in the draft with just Jim Harbaugh's ability to evaluate talent, I have them as the 7th best team in the NFL.
You realize J.K. Dobbins hasn't re-signed yet, right?
So maybe they'll add someone in the draft.
I don't know, man. I think their backfield.
You were the one that had been saying J.K. Dobbins, so I kind of just threw it out there.
I think they need to find somebody explosive in the draft, whether that be Travion Hendrickson or maybe he goes. God, if he goes in the first round, I'm going to laugh very hard at some team. Anyway.
I don't think Travion Hendrickson. But with the Chargers, if they don't fill some of the holes, I expect them to, like adding an explosive running back, maybe another receiving threat, and improving on some place on the defense through the draft. I would bump them down a few spots, but it's kind of
They're also going to have the left side of that offensive line absolutely destroyed if they do not use a draft pick on Tyler Booker early on. Might not even be on the board by the time they're picking. They've still got some holes. Their offensive line could still conceivably be an area of weakness. I've got them a bit lower. At number 6, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs. They've gotten worse on the offensive line. They've only slightly downgraded at left tackle, if that's what we're going to count Tooney as, which is what he was playing the final month or so of the season. The fall off from whoever they have at left guard is probably going to be pretty substantial. I have little faith in the Chiefs to draft an offensive line early who can replace either of those positions just based off the last few drafts. They've whiffed on that position time and time again. Skill player-wise, I think they're at about the same point. Diop did some very good work for them in the back half of 2024. Now that he's gone, Rashee Rice is going to have to step up. He will presumably be a little bit diminished off the injury. He also may be facing some suspension trouble. We have not heard anything about that yet. Presumably, the other shoe will drop. Like, he's not just going to get away with driving high and wrecking while street racing, right? You'd have to hope the NFL does something.
I don't know what they're going to do. They haven't done anything yet.
We can only hope. So that'll be a little bit diminished. Isaiah Pacheco was not the same guy once he got that plate in his ankle. Maybe he can come back and get back into form. I think that area is going to be worse. And their defense got drained a little bit in free agency. I didn't think the Chiefs were some runaway, domineering, clearly the best team in the NFL last season despite the 15 wins. Thought there were plenty of games they should have lost. I think there are going to be games this year in 2025 they do lose, which are going to be of the one-score nature. I think I'd rather have a few teams in the AFC over them. And I'd definitely rather have the top 2 rosters in the NFC, which are substantially more talented. All this is to say, I've still got them at 6. I think they're going to be a very good team, and I have a hard time betting against them in the playoffs against most people, but this is going to be a slightly diminished version of the Kansas City Chiefs we saw last year.
Yeah, I think where I'm being a little bit optimistic for the Chiefs relative to the talent that they've lost through free agency or also just trading players away. They don't have Joe Tooney. They lost Justin Reed, who's a key part of that defense. The Panthers gave Tristan Wharton a massive contract. He had 6.5 sacks for the Chiefs. Now, maybe that's because he was playing for Spagnuolo next to Chris Jones and some other talented players on that defensive line. That helped get him paid. So they have had some key losses, and there were some glaring weaknesses on their offensive line. The reason I'm still very optimistic for them and have the Chiefs ranked higher on my list is because their receiver room and the offensive side of the ball was just a mess of injuries last year. Rashee Rice went down early in the season. Marquise Brown was out the entirety of the year. So those are the 2 players they thought they were going to have that they didn't have. Then Xavier Worthy, as a rookie, was asked to step up immediately and play a big role. We haven't really seen rookie wide receivers be successful for the Chiefs early at any point during the Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes tenure. And then the Isaiah Pacheco also got injured early during the season, and they did not have exactly a very good backup plan behind him. Heading into this season, Marquise Brown re-signed, and you hope he's healthy heading into the year. Rashee Rice is going to play. Xavier Worthy's in year 2 of the offense. So just due to a few of those key factors and having the best potentially defensive coordinator in the NFL, still having Andy Reid, having Patrick Mahomes, that's why I'm not willing to drop them as far as you did.
I also think Jalen Moore is a pretty big risk. I may have been a bit generous when I said he's only a slight downgrade from Tooney at left tackle. Tooney was really playing well, all things considered, at that position. Moore looked good in the 49ers system, but they're well coached up front. And I don't know. I just am maybe being too optimistic. He could just fall off a cliff and not be a productive tackle. So you've got, once again, bad left side than Jawan Taylor on your right side. Mahomes could be running for his life every other play. I'm less than optimistic about him. Maybe I'm just tired of the Chiefs dynasty. Hey,
I see why people would detract for them, and I don't think 6 is necessarily unfair due to the positions they have downgraded at or lost during the offseason with the draft yet to happen. I'm just being a little bit optimistic for where they are at from a wide receiver and offensive skill position perspective heading into the year and their ability to at least replace their losses somewhat.
Not that I would wish this upon them, but it's kind of mirroring what happened with Brady after the perfect season. If Mahomes goes down, this team is winning 5 games, maybe. So
you're telling me you don't believe in Gardner Minshew to lead them?
Can't say that I'm a big Gardner Minshew, Carson Wentz, Carson Steele, Carson Palmer. Wouldn't matter who they got back there. I'm not a big fan of the Chiefs' backups.
At number 6, I have the Los Angeles Rams, and I have loved what the Rams have done this offseason. I think Davante Adams is a massive upgrade over Cooper Kupp. I think he gives you a bigger threat on the outside, a different skill set than what Cooper Kupp offered. I think Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua's skill sets were a little bit similar in how the Rams wanted to use him. I think Davante Adams is more of an outside threat, at least definitely compared to Cooper Kupp. Puka Nakua can also certainly do that in his own right, and having him on the roster is going to allow them to be a little bit more creative with Puka Nakua. They still have Kyron Williams in the backfield. Hopefully they allow Blake Corum to have a larger role in the offense in year 2. Hopefully they're able to improve the offensive line a little bit through the draft, at least improve the depth of the offensive line. Defense, I think, will be even better. And I think as for me, these top 6 teams, these are the teams that are like my early Super Bowl favorite contenders.
Yeah, I was spazzing out last year watching Ron Riverside get carries over Blake Corum. I was not a fan of Sean McVay doing that one little bit. I have a hard time. I've got the Rams at 5, so I'll just talk about them here for a little bit. I have a hard time putting the Rams below a team like the Chiefs, who I am confident if they played them head-to-head, with how good Stafford is in the playoffs, with how good their defensive line is, I have a hard time seeing the Rams losing that game. I have a hard time seeing the Rams losing a game to the Commanders, who, based off your lack of inclusion of them, I assume you've got them above them, just based off how good their front 7 is, how good Stafford is. This is a Rams team who is in the final grasp of a win-now moment. This is it. Stafford's got 1, maybe 2 more years left. They are investing heavily in him, getting Devontae Adams to sign that, hey, we are going for it this year. And I think there are very few teams positioned better to actually go out and get it done. Fewer more experience, fewer better coach, few have the depth on the defensive line. I think no one thinks the Eagles being stripped in free agency has the front 7 depth that the Rams do thanks to signing Puna Ford off the Chargers. This is a great team to me. I think they'll go on a deep playoff run. I think they could conceivably be the representative of the NFC in the Super Bowl. And I just can't see how you put them above or how you put them below some of the other teams you've got. But hey, your list. But I've just given you a pathway to talk about the Commanders. So explain why you've got Washington above LA.
Well, the Commanders, they received a lot of attention, a lot of praise, as you already mentioned, for them getting to the conference championship last year. And that was a massive accomplishment on their part. I think it is representative of how quality of a coaching staff that they have with what they're able to accomplish in year one, just how good of a quarterback and how unique of a quarterback Jaden Daniels was in year one. And they've taken the exact steps you want an organization to take when you have a young quarterback that's on a rookie contract and extremely talented. They went out and got you a better offensive tackle. I recognize some might not think as highly of him due to the false start issues he had last year. Some people think that he may have been a locker room problem with the Texans, but I think that is an upgrade from what the Commanders had. And then you look at what they did to their wide receiver room. They added another threat in Deebo Samuel to that offense. So I think the wide receiver room is a little bit better than it was last year. They improved the offensive line. As previously mentioned, I think Jonathan Allen is a big loss in replacing him with Javon Kinlaw on just $2 million less a year. I don't really understand that signing, but they have pretty good corners in Mikey Sanders still and Marshawn Lattimore, and I trust Dan Quinn. So just due to the fact I think they have upgraded their roster from what it was, how much I like the coaching staff, and how much I like Jaden Daniels, that is why I have the Commanders at 5.
So who do you have Jaden Daniels above quarterback-wise? Because I've got him in my top 5. Do you got him above guys like Herbert and Stafford?
I think from what we saw last year, yes. But if you think teams have figured him out a little bit and he may struggle in year 2 and you value the veteran status more, then you place those guys above him.
I definitely do not value Herbert's veteran stats more. I think you also didn't really talk about Dante Fowler. He was arguably their best pass rusher in 2024. He's no longer on the team at Dallas Cowboy, going to a division rival. I think that's going to hurt him a little bit. I think Mikey Sanders still is definitely a good cornerback. Will probably get even better in year 2. Lattimore was inconsistent the final 2 years in the Saints and inconsistent last year in the Commanders. I don't think their passing defense is going to be an area of strength for them. I think some of these teams could conceivably just light them up if it came down to it. I also don't think the O-line is going to be as good as you're making it out to be.
Well, and they also did lose Jeremy Chin, speaking to losing a piece on their in
They
their
got that
secondary.
dude from the Saints who I think was pretty all right, could probably replace Chin. Chin was more of a walk-down linebacker than a true safety, but
It's just another piece of that defense they lost where they're going to have to try and replace it, especially for praising the big moves they made via trades.
anyway, I think they're a fine team. I just think a lot of other teams in the NFC would beat them if it came down to it head-to-head. At number 3 and 4, I've got the Bills and the Ravens, and this is the most fence-sitting pick I'm going to make, but I'll say it like this. If the Bills were to play the Ravens in the regular season, I'm confident the Ravens would beat them. If the Bills were to play the Ravens in the playoffs, I'm confident the Bills would beat the Ravens. It's just kind of where I'm at with Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. I think Allen's the better quarterback. I think right now their offensive line is better. I think their depth at wide receiver is better. I think they're better at tight end because I think Mark Andrews is probably not going to be able to mentally shake off easily what happened to him in that playoff game. Ravens defense, obviously more talented, better in the back half of the season, probably will be better in 2025. But it's just the Ravens give me no reason to believe in them come playoff time. And I can't just completely ignore the most important part of the year for two teams which are relative like this. If you have the Ravens higher than them, by all means, they're both very good rosters, both had pretty good re-signings in free agency. Joey Bosa, if he stays on the field, is a pretty good acquisition, but that's a pretty big if. Both have holes they need to fill in the draft. I think the Ravens have a bit more luxury to go out there and draft best player available instead of the Bills, who will be looking for need, particularly on that defensive line. But this is where they are. They're at 3 and 4. They're not the best teams in the NFL, but they're hanging out.
You've called me out for being a fence sitter before, and now you're saying
if we're going by the playoffs mattering more, I'll put the Bills at 3 and the Ravens at 4. This is a regular season ranking. I'm fence sitting on the criteria as opposed to the actual team.
What do you think of, since you hated the Mahomes contract so much, what do you make of this Josh Allen contract?
It's not great, but it's also not 10 years.
It's also $55 million a season.
Yeah, again, it's
Against
not
the
great.
cap, that is not like way more than Mahomes is getting as far as cap hit.
Indeed, Josh Allen's not the greatest quarterback of all time, though. It's also not after the first year where the salary cap went down in recorded memory. More went into that Mahomes contract take than I think you're willing to admit.
I still think it's a really bad take.
Hey, if we're going to go pull up really bad takes, we're going to be here all day.
Anyway, I have the Bills at 4. I think they can certainly contend for Super Bowl with ranking them inside the top 5. I think some of their key moves that people point to that'll help them in 2025, they're somewhat lateral moves. They added Josh Palmer, lost Amari Cooper, although he never really found his footing in the Bills offense. They lost Von Miller, added Joey Bosa. If Joey's able to stay on the field, I think he can be better than Von Miller was for them last season, but somewhat of a lateral move. And I don't think they have improved markedly during the offseason, and I would still rank them below the 3 teams I have above them, although I do still think with Josh Allen, that Khalil Shakir, I think, is one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL. Hopefully Dalton Kincaid, I know his health was mentioned as an issue over the first 2 years of his career, is able to find his footing to an even greater extent. But I have them at 4, and I do still have them below the Ravens.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. I mean, they beat the Ravens in the playoffs. If they got a better spot, they beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. However you feel about that dubious bit of officiating, whatever, they're still clearly one of the best teams in the best conference, or at least the better conference. I'm looking at your list here. I've got the data. You've got the Chiefs at 3, which is an egregious bit of overreaction and glaze. But you've already talked about their wide receivers. So
yeah, I mean, the Chiefs are. I have the Chiefs at 3. I've said why I still have them ranked that highly. I'm putting a lot of upside and faith in their receiver room and having more continuity from their skill positions to start the year and their coaching staff. But if they fall off in a major way and only win 10 or 11 games, I could see that certainly happening. And I could see why someone would rank them at 6.
I think having a winning record in one-score games is not exactly a reason to say, oh, this team's a fraud. They're 11-0 one-score games. I think always winning your one-score games raises the eyebrow a little bit, particularly if you are winning them in tremendously fluky fashions. If you're having snaps fumbled, field goals blocked, and this applies to the Commanders a little bit too for me, having that last-second Terry McLaurin touchdown against the Cowboys, against friend of the program Josh Butler, having that Hail Mary go off against the Bears, which just ruined their season. Shaky wins like that made me think, okay, maybe this team's record was a little bit inflated and I knock them down a few pegs when reality catches up to them in 2025. Granted, Chiefs devil magic, the reality may not be catching up. We still could be dealing with some child sacrifices at Arrowhead. Have to wait and see. At number 2, I've got the Detroit Lions. It's the best roster in the NFL. The only reason they lost to the Washington Commanders was because Jared Goff had an absolute meltdown in the postseason, the likes of which we've really never seen from him. Even in the Super Bowl, I don't think he was as bad as he was against Washington with the 4 turnovers. The pick 6, just a pitiful performance. Defense worn down over time, a shell of its former self. If they only have 1 or 2 injuries on their defense instead of 22, this is probably at the very least, a team appearing in the Super Bowl. They give the Eagles a run for their money. They shut down Saquon, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith in a way no other team in the NFC was really capable of doing. This is purely hypothetical, but I choose to believe the Lions will not be snake-bitten 2 years in a row. If they can get this team on the field, they will win a whole lot of games. I don't care they play in the best division in football. I don't care they get to play the AFC North as their out-of-conference games. It doesn't matter to me. This is a great team, super talented, no areas of weakness at all, and I choose to believe they will be great in 2025, much like 2024. Their fan base sucks, though. So, I mean, I needed to interject that in somewhere. I can't say too much about the Detroit Lions pods without mentioning those troglodytes who crawl out of their caves in Detroit to leave comments on my TikTok videos. Those people should be bludgeoned with obsidian boluses until we are freed from their drivel. I'm not going to keep going.
I agree with you when it comes to the 2024 Detroit Lions. I think they probably are in that conference championship game, looking to make it to the Super Bowl, potentially winning the Super Bowl if we have a healthy version of that Lions team. But what did the Lions have in 2024? They had Aaron Glenn and they had Ben Johnson. Will they be healthier in 2025? You would hope so. But a large part of why I've dropped them so far is because of the turnover in that coaching staff. And I'm willing, after 2-3 weeks in the season, if they were just lighting people up and shutting people down because of how talented they are, to walk that all the way back, call them the first or second best team in the NFL.
Watch, they're going to play the Ravens week 1, and the Ravens are going to shellac them, and then you're going to feel validated by this, even though they're going to win their next 8 games.
But heading into the season, I am downgrading them in my top 10 because of my lack of faith in them to replace 2 excellent coordinators.
Brain drain is a myth.
Sure. At number 2, I have the Baltimore Ravens, and not a lot has happened with the Ravens in the offseason. They retained Ronnie Staley, which was really good. They added some depth to their wide receiver room with adding a veteran talent in DeAndre Hopkins. And this team still has Lamar Jackson. It still has Derrick Henry, even if he's older, coming off the best season of his career.
No. A really good season. We do not invalidate the last 2,000-yard rusher prior to Saquon by saying that. One of the best seasons of his career. Come on.
I believe he was more efficient than he was.
I don't give a rip about efficiency. That 2,000-yard season by that terrible Titans offensive line, come on now.
One of the best. Semantics.
An elite season. How about that?
He was an 1,800-yard rusher. If you want to, whatever. Yeah, incredible season from him. The best season of Lamar Jackson's career. Even though he did not win the MVP, they still have those 2 players. I think both of those players are still going to be dominant. A few of the games the Ravens lost last year, and the reason they were maybe not closer to the 1 seed in the AFC was because their defense struggled early and then found their footing late in the year. So I think that same defensive momentum with continuity on the defensive coaching staff will carry into this season. I think with what Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson are able to do on the offensive side of the ball, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, adding DeAndre Hopkins, Isaiah Likely, they have talent. All Mark Andrews, maybe a little bit mentally shaken. I trust what the Ravens have from a roster perspective. I trust their coaching, and I think they're still going to be the second best team in the NFL.
I could still be stuck in either the playoffs or weeks 1 through 10, but I don't have that much faith in them. I would like, if it's like you with the Lions, I'll walk this back a little bit if during the first month of the season the Ravens defense actually shows up. But having your team get in a dogfight week in and week out, have to score 45 points to win is not sustainable. Just ask the Cincinnati Bengals, who are not on this list. Speaking of which, let's run through some honorable mentions here before number 1, a.k.a. everyone in the AFC North besides the Browns. The Steelers, they're probably going to win, 9, 10 games?
They'll do what they usually do.
Regardless of whether they have a quarterback.
Get their fan base hyped up, make them think they're better than they actually are, win 9, 10 games like you just said, probably make the playoffs as a wild card team.
If Rodgers is on this team, I'll bump him up to 11. I'll go 11 wins. An ambitious prediction. The Bengals, they're going to lose every game 45-48. Even if they retain Trey Hendrickson, it's not like he was shaping an otherworldly defense, was single-handedly propping up this Bengals unit. They're terrible with him, and he just keeps getting older and older, and I have no faith in the Bengals to hit on their defensive draft picks. I'll throw the 49ers in here. I don't think they lost as much as people are saying. Just because you recognize the names does not mean the names are good. If we're giving Detroit the benefit of the doubt that they will probably stay healthy in 2025, or at least be less injured, we got to do the same for San Francisco.
I think they're different injuries. With the soft tissue injuries that McCaffrey dealt with last season.
Who knows if he'll walk again?
With the Bengals, I think their defense is just not going to be good. That's why I have them on the outside looking in. 49ers, they lost a lot of pieces.
Packers, let's do the Packers real quick since I need to get this off my
Packers
chest.
Just underwhelming last year.
The Packers are the 7th seed. That's where they belong. They're the 7th best team in the NFC. They wouldn't make the playoffs if the 16 playoffs still existed. Winning 1 game against the Dallas Cowboys, who infamously and famously fall apart in the postseason, does not move me in the slightest. Being in a close game with San Francisco in the rain 2 years ago doesn't move me. This team stinks. They'll get bullied by their division. The only reason they beat winning teams in 2024, like the Rams and the Seahawks, was because Geno Smith was injured, was because both the Rams star receivers were injured. It's not a good team, but people feel the need to talk about them. So maybe they'll get lucky and Jordan Love won't be hobbled at any point in the year, but
it depends on what you quantify as a good team, because I do still think they're a top 15.
They're one of the 32 best teams on the planet. They'd probably beat Georgia, Michigan, Alabama. They're in the NFL. I think they'd handle the Battlehawks and the Steamboats, or the Showboats if it came down to it. So I guess they're a good team.
That NFC North hate runs deep.
I have faith in them to overcome the Japanese Football League. On a neutral site, I would pick the Packers over any representative from Japan.
So we want to get to the number one team?
You got any more honorable mention? I feel like I just threw all these out. You can't think of a single other good team? Don't want to shout out the Panthers?
Maybe the Raiders with Geno.
Get out of here, man. You did that last year. We did this crap last year with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, man. Number one.
Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, good luck with that. Draft Mason Graham and have him play both sides of the ball like they're going to do with Travis Hunter. Have him be a guard and a defensive tackle. That's their only way to relevance. Number one, we've got the Eagles. And say what you want about getting ripped apart in free agency, losing your offensive coordinator to the New Orleans Saints. Big whoop. Kellen Moore, man, I could have called plays for that Eagles offense last season. Power off of really pick a tackle, I guess, is not exactly a radical concept. F it, Devontae or A.J. Brown is down there somewhere. It's not a difficult route to run. This is, besides the Lions, the most talented team in football. I'd argue their offense is more talented than Detroit's. This is a phenomenal, phenomenal unit. I think they've got a great motivator calling the shots for them. They've got a fantastic front office who, if they're not going to build in the draft this year, they're going to get pieces who will develop and just mold in over time and be key contributors. There are key contributors waiting in the wings just to step up and replace those rotational pieces who are now in Arizona or New England. The Eagles are the best team in football. They're the reigning Super Bowl champion. They're super talented. They're well run. They got a handsome quarterback. I mean, what else do we need to say?
I agree because they have lost depth pieces and also just talent on that defensive line. Losing Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, that can't be labeled as good things for this Eagles defense. But when you take a look at the talent they still have there, you have Nolan Smith, who I think is ready to step up and play a bigger role and play more snaps for the Eagles defense. You still have Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter on the interior of that defensive line. And then you look at what they did to add to the rotation of pass rushers. They added Azeez Ojulari, who talent was never the question when he played for the Giants. He had some very productive games and productive years with the Giants. The only question with him was health. So if you add someone like him to your team where you're not asking him to play as large a role in your defense and he can rotate in there, I think that's a good and underrated move.
I don't know, man. A lot of Giants fans on Twitter told me he's a scrub and they know football.
Well, he's a scrub if you value health and his ability to be a pure number one starter. But if you're just look at his pure pass rush ability, rotate into that defensive line, I think he can be a very productive player for them.
What's the best ability?
Availability.
There we go.
But, I mean, it's a team that has the best running back in the NFL.
They got to replace Mekhi Becton. I didn't go into that. I think that's a bigger loss than people think, not just because he's the largest guard, physically speaking, in the NFL, but he was a really big part of the Saquon rushing attack. Maybe it's like Cam Jurgens back out there and draft a center. Who knows?
It's a big loss, but they still have 4 Pro Bowlers since they're able to retain Lane Johnson on a 1-year deal.
I think they're retaining Lane Johnson from him sitting out in a boat in a lake somewhere. So he can make what? How $30 million is total on the contract now?
Yeah, and also, you talk about Saquon's quads, and they have A.J. Dillon in the backfield with those legs. Those are some big legs in that backfield.
If Saquon rolls his ankle and misses a week, A.J. Dillon's going to get hurt, but...
He's a nice piece to. I think it's more complimentary.
I'd rather not talk about A.J. Dillon's piece in the podcast, so we can save that for the post.
You're the one who brought up his piece.
You said it was a nice piece, man.
No, I said legs.
Look, we can get into your fascination with NFL running back quads later. That was our top 10. Let us know what you think. Am I woefully mistaken for rating the Vikings as one of the 7 best teams in the NFL? Is my co-host delusional for sliding the Bears into the top 10 despite them proving absolutely nothing? Are we being biased to the Super Bowl champions and overrating the Eagles? Is someone going to catch them for the number 1 spot? Let us know down in the comments. If you are still here, you probably already subscribed, but if you aren't, go ahead and click that little button. Does us a bunch of favors, makes YouTube like us, the algorithm gods smile down upon us. Click that like button. Use code Thicc with 2 C's on Underdog. We really should start plugging that when more than 2 people are still listening, and we will see you in the next video.